Welcome to Norwood Digest. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy, and we're here with NCM's News Magazine show. We've got a great show coming up. We've got a construction update, and we also have something that's been in the news a lot here, and it's the stormwater infrastructure issues that the town of Norwood has. And we have people from well, I'll ask them what the committee's name is in a second, but we have Selectman Bob Donnelly and FinCom Alan Slater. So gentlemen, welcome, first of all.
Thank you.
And so let's just start with, what are the stormwater issues that we're really facing right now?
Well, people have seen, in the news, what some of the issues have been. You had flooding. You had a major flooding issue in Upland Road a few weeks ago when somebody had to be rescued by a member of the fire department. I mean, it's really very simple, Jack. When you're looking at a stormwater system, an old system, you can't put 10 gallons of water into a pipe that's designed to take 5 gallons. I mean, it's really very, very simple, very, very basic. The system was designed years ago. It was a good design, but the fact is, Norwood has expanded. You got additional flow going into the system. You have more, impervious surface than we used to have in the good old days.
Yeah, for people who don't know, tell them what impervious surface means.
Impervious surface are roadways, or sidewalks, or driveways, or your patios, those types of
your
things.
Parking lots.
Right, parking lots. And instead of the rainwater infiltrating into the ground, it goes on the roof into your downspout, flows down your driveway onto the street and into a catch basin. And it's just a fact of life. It's something which isn't a problem solely in Norwood, but because of some of the additional development we've had over the years and the aging of the system, we continue to have problems.
Okay, so somebody's decided, I think, how to fix all this, and that's not the role of your committee, as I understand it.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, and the role of our committee is to come up, is to look at some of the different options for financing a stormwater system, because unfortunately, it takes money to upgrade the system. And it isn't a problem, Jack, of somebody not doing something or doing something wrong. It's at the point where something has to be done. I mean, as a civil engineer, I looked at it both ways. Do we have to do something, first of all? Because if I wasn't convinced something had to be done, I wouldn't be on the committee to come up with a plan to finance it, because, I'm a member of the FinCom, but I'm also a taxpayer, and something clearly had to be done.
So let me play devil's advocate a little.
Yep.
So you talked about the Upland Woods thing, and that was very scary, especially for that individual that was trapped in their car. Can that be traced to all the construction that they're doing up there, like at, they built those 2 apartment complexes, they're doing more construction up there. Is that what causes that, or that's part of it?
Well, it's certainly part of it, Jack. I mean, again, you have more impervious area. That clearly contributes something to the flow, but it's a fact that you have an old system. It was built years ago based on a certain area as well as a certain design storm. You never design a storm system for the 500-year storm. You just have a pipe that's be so big it wouldn't even be able to fit in the roadway. So you design it for a certain design storm. And the system served us well for a number of years, but with additional areas being tied in, as well as we get more intense storms. A 25-year storm of days gone by is now a 10-year storm.
Right. That's good. That's a very good point.
And it's just an accumulation of factors.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead, Bob.
And just to reiterate some of those points, yes, climate change is certainly an impact too. We have more rain, particularly in the Northeast, so that's a contributing factor. So the more rain we have, a system that can't, from a capacity standpoint, cannot move the water quickly enough through the system, that's infrastructure. We saw that, and this is an old problem in many ways. We can go back to 1998 when we lost our public safety building on Manhattan Street. The building flooded out completely, and certainly there was an investment the town needed to make to rebuild that facility, but we know that we don't want our public safety building being flooded out. it's important that emergency response can happen. So the more the rain that we get in a system that doesn't have the capacity to handle that anymore means more problems, more houses are flooding, more roads are flooding. You have the difficulties like at Upland Road, which probably does connect in that there are some, I think that's a state road, and I think they have the responsibility of making sure that the drains up there are cleaned and maintained correctly, and that's maybe a contributing factor to that incident. But all these things are coming together, and now is a time, and we've known this for 20 years. There's a variety of solutions that were proposed in the early 2000s under the initial engineering Meadowbrook study that was done. And we have incrementally done some of that work, but the majority of it has not been done. And so the solutions for 20 years ago are almost remarkably the same as they are today, but we just haven't made that investment.
Okay. So this committee was formed, and so tell us about what you guys have been doing.
I'll start because I'm the newest member.
And what's the name of the committee?
It is the Ad Hoc Stormwater Utility Committee. Alan and I are on it. It is chaired by Jerry Hopcroft, also an engineer. Heather Audit, a Norwood resident who also is an engineer. I'm the only non-engineer in the group, so I'm at a disadvantage, I guess. We're supported by Mark Ryan from an engineering standpoint, Holly Jones, who's from community planning with a good background in conservation, and Mike Rose supports us. The committee's charge is to get an idea of what the charge is in terms of financing this work, and what are the best ways of taking the engineering solutions that Mark Ryan's team has developed. How do we fund them? And so Alan can speak to that a little more specifically, but we looked at the various ways that you can fund these very large projects, which over the course of the next 10 years probably total in the vicinity of $40 million. So that is a dollar amount and a project investment that is pretty daunting. And there are some constraints in our operating budget to be able to fund those without causing certainly a big impact to our other services and operations that depend upon the town to support as well. So the committee has met for a better part of a year and a half. We have been supported by information from Mark's team, but we also have brought in consultants to give us information on best practices for how other communities do that. We've taken that work and we're trying to develop it into a suggested approach for the Board of Selectmen and town meeting to consider.
Okay. And so where are you getting the 40 million, Alan?
That's a good question, Jack. We looked at a number of different options. You could fund it the way we typically funded capital projects over the years. You simply, town meeting votes it, you put it in the town budget. Simplest method. The problem is every dollar you put into additional debt is a dollar less for the town government and for the school system. With the amount of money we're talking about, that would be an unacceptable option. You just take too many resources from the other areas of government. We looked at the possibility of doing overrides, like we did for the school system. The problem is that there are a number of projects you have to do over the years. You continually have to go for overrides, and it's a system that has been shown just not to work, in other areas. So we have a consultant from CDM Smith, somebody who I've known for well over 30 years. I've dealt with him in some of the projects I was involved with over the years.
Camp Dressy and what is that?
Camp Dresser McKee Smith.
Okay.
They merged with another firm probably about 10 years ago. They wanted to get more transportation expertise, but be that as it may. And they gave us some information about what's being done nationally. What seems to be the trend on a national basis? And the trend on a national basis is to go with what's referred to as an enterprise fund. And it's very similar, I think, as Bob noted, to what we do with water and we do with an electric. It's a separate entity. It's funded, through rates, just like water and just through electric. You have a lot of flexibility in whether you want to include not just capital, but O&M. Right now, it looks as if we may be aiming more towards capital, but that's to be, determined. And it gives you flexibility also in how you want to assess both the residents as well as some of the commercial establishments. It seemed to be a good system. We looked at it. The committee said it was a good idea, and that's the recommendation which we made to the selectmen.
And so, see if I got what you just said right, because this is not, this is complex for me, so. So can you do two different rates, like the tax rate? Is that, because you talked about business and you talked about residents.
You could do it the same way, using water and sewer as an example. We do that separately. The water and sewer budget is completely separate from the operations budget, which would support general government and our schools and so forth. So instead of the tax levy, you're relying on the water rates that every customer pays in order to provide you that service. On the water side, you have infrastructure improvement. Right now, we're in the middle of a 10-year plan to spend $45 million on improvements to our water system, including relining of all these water pipes. That's work that would be terribly difficult to do within the operating budget. But since we have the enterprise fund, since we're able to apply that rate structure, use the rate structure in water to help do that work, parallel to that in the stormwater side, we could do that and there are mechanisms for do that. Alan mentioned the impervious surfaces. We do have the consultant has provided us a way to measure the impervious surfaces for all commercial and residential properties in town. And we actually have a way to apply a fee that basically says the more pavement you have, the more impervious surfaces you have, the more you pay. So residents would pay a fee to help fund that capital program, but a large entity that has acres and acres of pavement, large shopping mall, whatever, certainly is going to pay a lot more than the residents do. So that's kind of the basic plan.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, Jack, is that when you look at how we set up taxes with some of these large commercial establishments who have acres and acres of parking, the parking lot itself does not contribute a lot to the tax base. It just is the way it is. However, when you look at it from the perspective of the stormwater fee, it's a large impervious area.
Right.
So if a resident is called an ERU, an equivalent residential unit. So a single family house is one unit. And that's based on a certain impervious surface. If a commercial establishment has 10 times the impervious surface, they pay 10 times the fee as a resident. And the other interesting thing about this is that it covers everybody. It doesn't simply cover businesses and the residents, it also includes the nonprofits. So when everything is said and done, the taxpayers of Norwood pay a slightly lower, not huge, but a slightly lower percentage of the enterprise fund than they contribute to taxes.
Okay. That makes sense to me, I think.
Sort of makes sense to us.
So, I know this isn't your committee's charge, but can you give a couple examples of what the projects that will happen? Well, let me ask you before you do that. Remember that culvert on Dean Street? Was that part of this at all? Meaning, Bob, you had said earlier that we've done some things along the way.
We've done, over the past 5 years, I'd say, the town has taken advantage of federal grant monies to help support this work.
That was going to be my next question. You know what?
Sure.
To
answer your question, yes. The Dean Street work is being, there's some work that's being done on drain improvements, which basically will lead to this summer, a large drain pipe underneath Dean Street will be replaced because it's too small. We need a high capacity one. So that is a project that is included in, that's going to be paid for by ARPA, not by our fee.
Okay.
ARPA is running out.
Yeah,
so we don't have that luxury in the future to say we're going to do this work because we have the federal fund. That's not going to be the case a year down the line.
But is you know what? I'm jumping all over the place. So let me discipline myself and answer the question that you were going to answer with that paper.
So what the paper I have here is, nicely supplied by Mark Ryan, is an outline of from 2022 all the way up to 2034 the schedule of work that would be planned to be done to address the amount of stormwater work that we have, and it's quite heavy. You have a lot of work that's being done in the Meadowbrook watershed area, which is a very large area where I'd say most of the stormwater is generated from the town and it drains into the Meadowbrook and then onto the Neponset. There's a variety of work that needs to be done there to improve the culvert system leading to the Meadowbrook, drainage system through the Hennessy Field area, culverts to move the water appropriately. I think one of the projects that's interesting to me is the way the water moves through the system would be enhanced through some of these projects. Right now, it flows down through the center of town, through right in front of the police and fire station. One of the projects is to manage that water to flow, instead of going down there where we've had problems, bring it down through Broadway down to the drainage area that way. There's projects to improve the drainage through Hennessy Field, to detain the water, so it retain the water in heavy storms so that we can reduce the flooding, and then when the rain dissipates, we can release water slowly into the
So is that the
Meadowbrook.
big one? That's the one
That's
I hear
the big
about.
one.
Okay.
That's the big one.
Hennessy's the big one. I mean, again, looking at it solely from an engineering standpoint, everything flows in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Something has to be done in that area. If something isn't done in that area, then the whole house of cards just falls down.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, you can't. You can replace culverts and piping downtown, make them bigger, but if they're just going to bring water that backs up into the drainage in the Hennessy Field Meadowbrook area, it's not going to help. So they're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
So the ARPA money's running out. Is there any federal or state money to do projects like this?
Well, there's limited. I mean, we'll always look for it, but the reality is there really aren't many large-scale grant or loan programs such as we have for sanitary sewers and some of our water lines. It just isn't considered on a state level or on a national level as important as those other kinds of utilities.
We are pursuing some, though, so just, there are grants out there that we are interested in and are putting applications. We just can't bank on getting approved.
Yeah. No, I get that. But the reason I brought it up is I want people to know that you guys know that there's potential and you're chasing it.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I'm not going to let people,
Think that it's
give
gonna
a
happen.
false hope.
No, but
you
it's
know,
important that they know
yeah.
we're trying to get every dollar we can.
Right.
And a lot of the work to be done in addition to ARPA, a lot of the smaller work that's been done around town has been done with some state funding as well.
Now, the rotary down by the one that they're going to do at
Prospect.
Prospect, yeah.
That's state, because that's part of the state road still?
Yes.
So can we do any of this as part of that? Any of these projects relate to that?
My understanding is that's a
don't
question
think so.
for Mark Ryan, but my understanding is that yes, that there'll be some new stormwater mitigation being done at that. But we are not the town engineers.
Yeah, no, I
but,
get it. I just didn't know if you knew. All right,
I think anytime that we're seeing new development in town, there are requirements now that whoever is doing that project has to take stormwater mitigation into consideration. Even Alan chairs the building committee for the Coakley, and we had our update recently, and they took us through the visual and the work being done for stormwater mitigation at that site. Those are the things that in modern construction we're doing today. So, but there's still a need from a municipal standpoint to upgrade the infrastructure that currently exists under our streets.
Okay. What do you want the people to know that we haven't talked about?
I think we want them to know, I guess I would look at it this way. When we have had some public meetings, no one likes a fee. We understand that. So folks can say it's a rain tax, it's a stormwater tax, they don't like it. But at the end of the day, just like in our water system, what with the $45 million that we're doing now to improve our infrastructure, the $2.8 million we're putting in extra to do our roads, infrastructure needs to be taken care of. If we do nothing, if we just let this work go unattended, we're going to see more flooding in Norwood. We saw major flooding in 2020. We know those kinds of storms are going to increase in the future. The ways and means that we need to attend to mitigate against those is to invest in our infrastructure. And it's hard for people to get their heads around because it's all underground.
Right.
It's not visual, but there's a need to be done. And that there are a group of citizens who are looking at this very, I'm going to say dispassionately, but we are educating ourselves on the needs, and we understand that there are consequences for not making that investment in the infrastructure, and we're doing the best we can to ensure a safe future for Norwood from a stormwater perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the arguments I constantly hear, Jack, is like, well, you haven't done anything to date, why should we do something now? And all it really does is just continue the problem. I mean, we know there's a problem. Should somebody have done something 20 years ago? Well, hate to use the term, but that's really water over the dam, so to speak, you know. As I said earlier in the show, I mean, I come from a little bit different perspective. I have a technical background also, but I'm also FinCom. You know, I'm reluctant to ask the taxpayers to pay more money. We've asked a lot of them the last few years, and the only reason why I'm in support of something like this is because to me, it's absolutely necessary. It's absolutely necessary to solve the problem today. It's absolutely necessary to solve the problem in the future, and that's to me the bottom line.
Right.
Could I just add one more element to that?
Yeah,
Whatever
you guys want to add.
Yeah.
The other thing that I have heard in conversations with folks is, and I'll take my house for example. I live on Morse Hill. I have a driveway that's inclined into my yard. I have rain barrels. Personally, I can see that I'm not really contributing a lot of runoff onto the street. Why should I pay for this if I'm not part of that? My basement doesn't flood. And I think the answer to that is that this is a community problem that community needs to solve. I may be doing everything I can, or I may be in a location where I don't flood, I don't contribute to the flooding, but when I get out of my driveway, I want to make sure I'm able to get downtown to my doctor's appointment. I want the firefighters to get out of the public safety buildings and come to my house if there's an emergency. Those are important things. That's why it's important that the community address this, because it does affect us all.
Yeah, and just because I don't personally have a problem, you know, we have a map, Jack, which has a lot of red dots over the whole town. That shows people who've had problems, you know, with flooding. And these are citizens.
I live at the top of the hill. I'm good.
Yeah. And, you know, these are citizens, you know, our friends and our neighbors.
Right.
And I think, you know, as public officials voted by the public in Norwood, we have a responsibility to look out for their interests.
Yeah, I would say we remember 2020 and the flood that occurred there, and the town put together a grant program to help residents who were impacted, because it was more than the hospital. It was a lot of homes that were impacted by that. And so I was one of the volunteers that worked with other folks to go into folks' homes who've been flooded out and see the damage that was done. And there are some pretty sad stories to be told there about people who spent thousands of dollars renovating their basements or had living quarters in their basements, totally ruined. And the insurance would only cover so much. The town helped out with some, but the problem still exists. And it's just, when you see what happened to some of these homes, it has a personal impact that I still take with me to this day, 4 years later.
And was that ARPA money, that a lot of that? No.
ARPA money.
For the folks you were just talking about.
No, I don't recall what the exact.
I remember there was a program, but I can't remember.
The grant was not. Remember it either.
Yeah, it was a grant, but I think it may have been before ARPA. Anyways, it was 2020. I think ARPA came probably during the Biden administration, so it would have been like, well, could be.
Yeah. It would have been right around then. That's why I was asking.
Yeah.
But I remember it was a grant program. I just couldn't remember the source. So, what else?
I guess we talk about some upcoming events, perhaps some information, maybe information that people want to stay tuned about. So I know in late April, right now in terms of the Meadowbrook work, which is a great majority of our work in town, because the Meadowbrook is a gigantic watershed that contributes a lot to stormwater. We have a current project regarding the Hennessy Field design project. The consultant engineers now have been doing some testing, doing some work there just to figure out if we could do it. Is the Hennessy Field, where there is an existing infrastructure now, a drain pipe that drains under the field, is there a way to improve that? We are talking about a detention basin there. If not, what are the alternatives to that? Public meetings coming up in the neighborhood in late April, I think it's April the 25th, so that the engineering group and Mr. Ryan can kind of bring forward the detail to date in terms of what the impact would be if this project were to go forward. So that's a big one that's specific there. The Board of Selectmen, we have heard the committee has come in previously. The committee, our committee has come in and presented information. They've made a specific recommendation for a utility fee. Selectmen have heard that, and now we are interested in having the consultant from CDM Smith come in, who is sort of the expert in how fee structures work, educate us so we can ask questions, look at different ways of doing that, so that we can then proceed to have some consideration in the spring for perhaps developing a specific enterprise fund to help fund that. I think we probably have on the table, and I don't know what the timeline is, but our general committee, we've had a couple of public meetings to talk about the utility fee. We probably could use another one or two in the next coming weeks.
We've had meetings along with the Neponset River Watershed Association at the library to present information on the fees. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to do it again prior to town meeting, because if things go well, maybe we could set something up and vote some projects at town meeting. But again, people have to believe that there's a problem, because you're asking them for money. Unless they believe there's a problem, and rightfully so, they won't vote anything.
So procedurally, this committee made a recommendation to the selectmen. So what happens next?
So the selectmen need to consider whether or not we should establish a fee structure to help either fund operations and maintenance plus capital, or fund just our capital plan. How would we do that? How would the fee work? How would you assess a fee? The selectmen have to agree that that's the way we want to go. Town meeting would then meet in May to say, we want to establish what's called an enterprise fund, a funding mechanism that, similar to what we do for the electric department as well as water and sewer, a fund specifically that fee that's collected goes into that fund that allows the town to borrow the money necessary to do this work. All the project work that's associated with that would still go through the regular processes for all project work. And that would mean, getting vetted by selectmen, the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, capital outlay, then end up I would think in the coming years, year by year, for discussion at a November time frame when we approve and look at all projects. But the first thing is to set up the best ways of funding.
The November time frame would be town meeting?
Yes, the special town meeting we have in the fall.
And I think the important point, in funding projects with an enterprise fund is the selectmen can't go off on their own and finance projects. Everything still has to be vetted, by the selectmen, by the FinCom, and most importantly, by town meeting. If town meeting says no, the project doesn't go.
And it also is an advantage in that when we have the enterprise fund set up for something like water and sewer, we know that that's what it's for. Money that's collected can't be used.
Yep.
You're not going to use it to build the sidewalk over
here.
Same here.
Very specific rules and laws that don't allow you to do that.
Right.
Okay. Just one more thing that's kind of a minor, not a minor, you can almost look at this whole work as being almost an unfunded mandate in some ways. I think we're all old enough to remember the river that got on fire years ago, and I think in New York or whatever.
Yeah, there was a
Cleveland.
Cuyahoga River.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so that was probably the early 70s. That kind of pollution into rivers was one of the reasons why the Clean Water Act was passed. That came up with a regulatory. So I think in years before that, it was probably a matter of we had stormwater systems to take water off our streets and drain it into the riverbed.
It was really, to put it very simple, it was out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Just a very simple principle.
Then the city, the federal government recognized that it's a source of pollution so we are under permit. We as a town have a permit with the Mass DOT and EPA because the water that we have here, stormwater, does drain into the Neponset River. So it's something we haven't talked a lot about, but we are subject to federal fines if, in fact, our system fails and it's polluting the waters in and around Norwood. something else to consider. We need to improve our compliance when we fund our programs for stormwater management.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, anything else? I don't want you to leave and say, oh, I wish I had said this.
I'm sure as soon as I leave, we'll be like, why did I say this? But
I think there's a lot of information
Yeah.
on NCM NCM site to look back at some of the public meetings that we've had previously. I would say just people be open-minded, understand. I think what I want people to understand is our committee. What we're trying to do is solve a funding problem, and we know we're gonna get feedback that whether it's a rain fee or a stormwater fee, tax. All right, you call it what you want, but what we're trying to do is there is funding needed to improve something. We as leaders in the town need to take that seriously, because there are consequences for not doing this work.
Yeah.
And again, this is a principle, an enterprise fund, which isn't something which simply Norwood is doing. This is something other communities in Massachusetts are doing, and I think nationwide it's well over 2,000 communities that are adopting an enterprise fund. This is the way to go. It's simple. It mandates that the money spent goes specifically to stormwater.
And that's a key point.
That is a key. People have always wondered about, where does your money go? Very, very specific requirements that you don't want to get in the other side of that requirement if you can avoid it. So, again, I speak not only as an engineer, but as a member of the FinCom. FinCom will have to weigh in on this too. Again, you hate to ask people to spend money. We've asked a lot of our taxpayers, but this is something which I think is critical to the future of Norwood.
And it's a funding mechanism that's meant to fund all stormwater work in all neighborhoods. It's, we have big problems in the Meadowbrook area, but there are projects on here that are outside the Meadowbrook areas that need to be funded as well. So this is a town-wide issue from a project standpoint.
Well, this was great. I learned a lot today, so hopefully people watching will as well. So I thank you both for being here and
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Giving the folks the needed information on this, because there's a lot of talk out
It's
there.
complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.